Okay, thank you for coming back to the masterclass. My name is Jason Chao. I have the honor to introduce Dr. Ariadna Matamoros-Fernández. Um, the- Dr. Matamoros-Fernández is a lecturer in digital media in the School of Communication at Queensland University of Technology and a member of the Digital Media Research Centre. Her research covered controversies, extremism, hate speech, racism, and misogyny on social media. In her recent work, she provided detailed accounts of how user practices and the affordances of platforms relate to the right-wing movements. Aliana has extensive experience in studying various platforms such as WhatsApp, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I believe that we will greatly benefit from her insight into the study of platforms. Without further ado, I yield the floor to Dr. Ariadna Matamoros-Fernández.
Hi, thanks for the nice introduction and welcome everyone. It's very nice to see so many people. Yeah, I'm based in Brisbane. Here it's 10 p.m. So it's a bit late, but I'm very happy to be here. So today I was asked to give like this masterclass, and my idea for this presentation is to give you a bit of context, but I will mainly talk about a project that I'm doing using digital methods and that it's meant to observe platforms over time and at scale, especially cross-platform dynamics. So the way that I've structured the presentation is really like walking you through what I would do if I would start a project on digital methods, that I believe that this is what you are doing in this like winter school, in this data sprint. So I'll talk a bit about tools, files, but also research questions and how we can contribute both methodologically and theoretically, and when we are doing this kind of projects using digital methods. So just a bit of an introduction. Let me see if I can. So I'm sure that you all know this book. So when I did my master's at the University of Amsterdam, I read this book for the first time. And a lot of my projects follow a digital methods approach, right? So it's not understanding the internet as only a virtual real, but as an opportunity to understand society. And it's just studying the internet with the internet, right? So when we are looking at social media platforms, in a way, it's not only what the users are doing, but how these platforms are shaping behavior. And much of my research is looking at platform traces and user traces within these platforms and all the relationships between these non-human actors that could be links, could be algorithms, and then the users how appropriate these technical affordances. So digital methods inspires my work. And lately I've been collaborating with Bernard Rieder for a few years now, and I was inspired by this latest paper that he wrote about platform observability for better regulation. And I think that pretty much describes really well what we've been doing together with Oscar Coromina, looking at ranking cultures, but also in general, the way that I approach this type of research. And an interesting distinction that Rieder and Hoffman do in this paper is that they talk about the difference between asking for more transparency for better regulation, because more transparency not necessarily will lead us to more comprehension of what's going on these platforms and hence better regulation. But they advocate to have more observability. And with this, they use the example of algorithms. So instead of asking platforms to give us access, transparency with the code of algorithms, the idea is to be able to observe what these algorithms do. And when we look at what algorithms do, we move closer to understanding how these algorithms work. And pretty much when you take this approach of platform observability, and obviously you need to regulate to be able to observe through different approaches that he goes in deep into this paper, but I'm not going to unpack here. But it's just this idea that time, it's very important when we do this analysis, because when we factor time in analyzing these really complex socio-technical systems that social media platforms are, we are able to identify patterns. And this pretty much informed my work, and I'm increasingly interested in observing these large-scale socio-technical systems over time, right? So the ultimate aim, as they say in their paper, is to really create meaningful understanding that can serve as an effective check on platform power. And this is what I'm doing during the project that I will present, but also what I've been doing, like this idea of observability, what I've been doing in other projects. So broadly, like, important projects are informing the paper or the project that I'm working on. And one of these ones is this study of algorithms that I've done with Bernard and Oscar. The other big project that is informing my current work is this cross-platform interest that I have, that I wrote, Jean Burgess and I wrote this paper on multi-platform issue mapping. So how to understand public communication and going beyond the single platforms analysis and going across platforms. But also, I'm interested in understanding how the social media platforms are becoming more professionalized platforms media systems. So it's not just amateur user creators doing fun stuff on the internet, but they are making money on these platforms, especially YouTube. So this is the paper on the ranking cultures, where we looked at these algorithmic outcomes and on how YouTube is ordering results when we are looking for certain queries. And we observed this over time. So we were seeing how different agencies are at play when YouTube is generating search results for the queries. So based on this paper, we used a combination of qualitative analysis and using the rank flow tool that I don't know if you're using it in this data sprint, but it just helps you to identify patterns over time. So it lists items by like the ranking that you choose, and you can observe these changes over time. And we use this for the YouTube ranking results. And I'm using the same method to understand, instead of YouTube ranking cultures in terms of search, I'm using also the rank flow tools to understand algorithmic recommendations on YouTube. So what is being shown in the up next section of YouTube, this is a work in process, and it's a work under review that I'm doing in collaboration with Joe Gray, Luisa Bartolo, that's a PhD student, and Jean Burgess. And here we are doing the same. So we are observing algorithmic outcomes over time, plus down the recommendation chain. So when we are looking at one video, normally on YouTube, we have the step one, that would be the first videos that we see in the up next section. But then if you click or you have autoplay, you have another set of videos that are being recommended. And there's a lot of talk about the YouTube algorithm driving users into a rabbit hole. So we wanted to just explore a bit this and seeing, again, the different agencies at play in generating these results. So this is the tool that we are using for this project. It's a tool that Bernard developed, and as I was explaining, it generates like a visualization that I'll show you later on, and you can track change over time. And the file that you need to use this tool, normally it's just a spreadsheet, and you have one column where you have your items. In this case, we had video titles, and this is the example that Bernard uses in explaining how the tool works. And you have a second column where you give a value. So this is the way that it will give a color and a width to the bar that represents, in this case, these are videos, YouTube videos. So I've been using this tool a lot for these two projects that I've talked about and for the project that I will present now. And when you are using the rank flow tool, you can see this kind of visualizations. So these are the rank flow diagrams that we got from Gamergate, is the on top, Syria in the middle, and Trump. So when we were looking for Trump, the videos, and each column is giving us like the videos that are ranked. So each column is a video. And then every time that we have a flow is because the same video is being recommended for the search of that query into another day. So this is the time period, I think, that we did around 6 or 7 weeks. So you can see that we go from more stable morphologies when we looked for Gamergate. So it means that YouTube was giving the same videos every day when we were typing Gamergate in the search box. Then Syria was a bit more, we had more change, and Trump, we're having different results almost every day. So we can see less flows because YouTube is just giving different results and different videos. And this is the case with the rank flow diagrams that we use for the YouTube recommendations. So I was saying we looked at step 1, step 2, and step 3. And what we did in this project to observe this change over time and to understand how the algorithm works by looking at what the algorithm was doing is not only focusing on videos, but this is showing me the channels that were most recommended. So we can see that at step 2, there are clear winners. That is these first visualizations that you can see. And this is meaningful because we use coronavirus, feminism, and beauty. And we can see that, for instance, for the feminism query, the first recommendations are always involving content creators that are highly anti-feminist, that this aligns with previous research. So it's another way of using the rank flow tools that, again, is not only giving information to us of how the algorithm is constantly changing the videos that recommends, but also how it changes down the rabbit hole. Well, not the rabbit hole, in this case, down the recommendation chain. And as I was saying, the multi-platform issue mapping is also informing the work that I will present. And the idea with this is that when we are following digital traces, sometimes when we start with Twitter, that it's a rich repository of URLs, then by filtering our tweets by domain and just having a sense of other sites that are important within this public communication, this can help us to just then use Twitter as a way of pointing us to other different spaces within the internet where interesting conversations are happening. And in most of the cases, when we do analysis on Twitter, we see that YouTube is one of the most shared domains in any public discussion around any newsworthy issue or controversies or any topic that you are interested in. So it's interesting to see how people use YouTube both to make a point on Twitter, but also as a source of information. And the last project that I think it's very important, it's this project that I also did with Bernard and Oscar, and it's the first attempt to map YouTube through channel connections. So we were able to kind of have a general picture of YouTube and following the governance structure that YouTube follows in terms of monetization. So we looked at the number of subscribers that the channels that we collected had and tried to have a picture of the thresholds of monetization based on how YouTube is kind of is organizing the platform. And I'll give more information about this again with the project that I'm presenting. So this is what I want to talk about. This current project that I will walk you through, it's a collaboration with PhD student Luisa Bartolo. She's doing amazing work at QUT, and computer scientist Betsy Alpert, and she works at the Digital Observatory at QUT. So the starting point that motivated this study is, okay, well, we know that this information is an extremism, are cross-platform problems, right? But we still get a lot of studies that are single platform. So misinformation on Twitter, misinformation on YouTube, on Facebook. So we wanted to account for this cross-platform activity within what was going on with COVID at that time. Then another interest is, as I said, a controversy. So the COVID is not only an event, but it's generative of different sub-controversies. So we have a lot of actors discussing about the same issue. So it's interesting then to study these kind of topics and controversies that are generative. Following this idea of observability, what I wanted to look at is how YouTube URLs were shared on Twitter over different months and understand the patterns of both the behavior that we could see on Twitter, but also going to YouTube and making sense of the channels that were uploading these videos that were shared on Twitter. And then trying to link it with professionalization. And around this, the starting point of this project was also this idea of, we had some concerns about, okay, there's a lot of focus on inauthentic behavior and coordinated inauthentic behavior, but there's not a lot of clarity or a clear definition about what this is. Right? So we wanted to just look at how platforms understand this and whether we can just have better definitions or see whether the way that the rules are enforced in relation to this coordinated inauthentic behavior are the best enforcement patterns that we can observe. So why YouTube? Why I was focusing on observing the YouTube URLs that were shared on Twitter over time instead of looking at the Facebook URLs that were shared over time within public conversations around COVID. The reason why I'm interested in YouTube is, as I said, it's a cultural archive that it's widely used to search information, but also, as I said, as a source of information to comment on public issues, especially on Twitter. But also YouTube is one of the few platforms that you really can make it. You can make money as a content creator, and it has a clear system of monetization. So this, drawing on the research that I did with Bernard and Oscar, this idea of professionalization, it's very interesting to me, because I had this feeling that maybe when we are observing automated behavior on Twitter around newsworthy events, it's not always coordinated, or it's not always about disinformation or problematic content. Maybe there's a relationship between engaging in automated behavior on Twitter just because you're a content creator that wants to make it on YouTube. So you want more visibility. So you go on Twitter and you share your videos and you tap into broader conversations just to amass an audience. So that's why I was interested in this idea of just focusing on tweets containing YouTube URLs. And also because there are some studies that have said that actually COVID-related misinformation on YouTube largely finds an audience by being shared on other platforms rather than within YouTube itself. So there is this practice already of sharing YouTube videos on Twitter to increase your visibility and have more audience, right? So then why Twitter? Why Twitter as a starting data source? Because again, there are some studies that have gone to Facebook, and they go to Facebook and they looked at the most shared URLs, YouTube URLs within Facebook groups. My idea to look at Facebook and why I think it's important if you are interested in this idea of automated behavior, but also how to use Twitter to gain visibility is precisely because of the platform vernaculars of Facebook. And platform vernaculars, this is a term to describe the practices that emerge on each social media platform as a combination of the platform's technical affordances and how users appropriate these affordances. And on Twitter, anonymity, like bots accounts, these are a feature, that not like a bug, right? So it's really easy to engage in automated behavior on Twitter. So that was interesting to me, because then observing this activity over time, we could see how much of this sharing of URLs is, it seems like, automated, that not necessarily needs to be coordinated, just automated, and the reasons why people would like engage in such a behavior, right? So, and again, there was, in relation to COVID, I was reading a lot of inauthentic behavior, coordination, foreign interference. But again, I think there's something else than that when we think about automated behavior, that it's linked to this issue of, and this concept of wanting to professionalize, wanting to make it on YouTube, so then you use other social media platforms to promote yourself. But I didn't find any evidence. So we know, we have the hunch, but I wanted to just try to see whether I could just give some evidence. So again, like, just to be quick, when we go to platforms and this idea of inauthentic behavior, like this term already, it has been like used, it's quite recent that we use this inauthentic behavior, but because normally inauthentic behavior is part of this like policies on platform manipulation. Facebook has a policy on inauthentic behavior and they are describing it, but on Twitter, it's largely, inauthentic behavior is largely behavior intended to artificially amplify or suppress information or engage in behavior that manipulates or disrupts people's experience on Twitter, right? Within this broad information, we don't know how many times can you tweet to be considered inauthentic, right? We don't have a number of times, and this platform justify this choice because they say that if they would give more information, then bad actors could just start operating, like, just be like below the threshold of what is considered automation or misuse of these platforms. But when we think about inauthentic behavior or automated behavior within these definitions, again, there's a section that covers this coordinated behavior. And this has been pretty much the focus of research and media talk around COVID, around elections. So it's this idea, and it's being militarized in a way. This is what Evelyn Douek says about this, that the coordinated inauthentic behavior, and pretty much focused on foreign interference or really sophisticated threats. And again, when we think about, okay, why people engage in coordinated behavior or just without coordinated inauthentic, normally it's for an ideological purpose. So I'm a foreign government and I want to interfere in elections, or far-right groups, or hyper-partisan media, right? So you want to undermine faith in institution. That's one of the motives. And the other typical motives is commercial. So spammers that engage with automated behavior just to try to mislead so that you will click a link and then maybe it's a scam or just push you to buy something. So with this in mind, as I said, I wanted to kind of prove or observe or just examine whether professionalization was also an important motive of engaging in this automated behavior. And to do this, then I was exploring both in this project, I wanted to explore both the behavior over time on Twitter, to just understand this automation, whether I could see this automated behavior over time. And to do this, then I moved to YouTube to see what kind of videos were shared and what channels were uploading these videos. Because by doing this qualitative analysis on YouTube, I could understand who were these actors and whether some of the motives to like what triggers some channels to engage in automated behavior on Twitter is precisely this professionalization within YouTube, not necessarily commercial spammers that they have external websites. So when you're thinking about this, okay, I had this interest, I had to articulate this in research question. This is a bit difficult, especially with the data sprint. You have a project, but then you really, if you have a good research question, then it's easier to focus on what are you going to do, your analytical approach, and also sometimes even like your data collection. But in this case, we were crafting our research questions after the data collection. One of the research questions is, okay, does the quest for professionalization on YouTube play a role in patterns of automated behavior on Twitter during newsworthy events such as COVID, right? This is simple. So again, we wanted to say, okay, yeah, commercial purposes as spammers and professional content creators, maybe they have an economic motive, but there's a nuance here that it's important to investigate and see whether we can have some clarity about why people would engage in these behaviors. And the second, it's a bit more a methodological contribution, because it's say, okay, we have these round flows. I've been observing activity over time, especially to study algorithms, but okay, I have also URLs. I can rank the URLs based on how many times these URLs have been shared on Twitter. And I can observe this and understand these patterns of behavior, right? So why people are sharing YouTube videos. And not only this, but I can see whether these patterns of automated behavior are linked to the nature of the YouTube content share. Is it, when we think about automated behavior, sometimes we say, okay, it's linked to problematic content. But I wanted to see whether this is always the case, because maybe, again, people are engaging on automated behavior on Twitter just to promote their content, and their content is not necessarily problematic at all. So what did we do? We collected data as we all start these projects, Twitter data during 4 months. And I just wanted tweets that contain YouTube URLs, okay? So in the end, I had more than 1 million, well, almost 2 million tweets with that contain YouTube URLs. After the cleaning, you can see that in the end, it's around 800 unique URLs that were shared over the period of these 4 months. Just a quick note on ethics. For this presentation, I will show you the names of the channels that we analyzed. The only thing that, because we consider that YouTube is public, but also that the channel that we are talking about, they use YouTube to reach an audience and to amass an audience. So that's why we are showing the channel. The only ones that I anonymized are the ones that were run by minors, because we found some minors that were kind of engaging in automated behavior on Twitter just to promote their content. But these ones are anonymized. So a bit quick about how do we generate the files. I don't know if this information is useful, but sometimes it's part of the process, and you will be used to this kind of files when you approach these projects. So as I said, I had a collection of almost 1 million tweets, but the only thing that I wanted were files that could rank me URLs based on the most shared URLs every day for each month. So for February, March, April, and May, right? But to be able to understand whether these URLs could be like these tweets were automated, or like the users on Twitter were just engaging in automated, I needed to know the unique users that were sharing these URLs, right? So this is the typical spreadsheet that I had before doing the run flow. So I have the typical information and have the date that the tweet happened. I have the video ID. If I have the video ID, I have the channel ID, right? So I could easily transform these videos IDs into channel IDs too. I had the number of times that a particular URL was tweeted, but also, as I'm saying, the unique users. And we can see it, the first row, we can say, okay, this URL has been tweeted 300 times, but just by one user. Whereas the second URL that time, it's almost 200 times, but by 170 users. So this is more like a viral video. Whereas the other one, it's kind of odd because we don't share a URL on Twitter, like if you're a unique user 300 times. So this is a sign of automation, right? So, okay, based on this, I wanted run flows. But there's a problem because Bernard just did this run flows and the tool works just with one column and it's one value. So I only had the time tweeted. And I was saying, yeah, but I would like to have the unique users because otherwise I cannot identify the automation there, right? And one thing that I want to stress here, especially when you approach digital methods projects, is the importance of creativity. And the more you do these projects, the more you know what can be done, and the more you can negotiate and see whether you can do these transformations. And I like how Tanya Booker also talked about this notion of play and technographic inquiry when she describes like observing algorithms. And I pretty much align with this. So I talked to Betsy that it's a computer science. Hey, Betsy, can you just look at the code? Because most of the time these tools are open access. And could we just try to add another column so we have two values and we can identify this notion of automation? So she looked at the code and could do it. But then we had the problem, okay, that's nice. Now the tool can read a file with two values, but I still have, okay, I have two things that allow me to identify patterns. One is the color with the run flow, I have 3 colors. And the other one is the width of the bar. So if it's really large, but with the run flow, it encodes the same value. So I was thinking, okay, if I have to encode the number of unique users into colors, how am I going to differentiate in 3 colors? I can't. And the only thing that I wanted is to be able to identify automation. So again, I had another kind of problem because yeah, I had the second value, but I needed to transform it in a way that in 3 colors, I could identify those tweets, group tweets, that were like sharing URLs a lot of time, but just 1 or 2 unique users. So again, when you do collaborative projects within the data observatory, there's a really nice computer scientist that works with the statistics. And she said, well, let's put these tweets into kind of bins. And then let's look at the average tweet per user. So that's what we did, and that's how we could color code the run flows to identify tweets that were similar in terms of behavior. So we have bin 0, that these are the tweets that I was saying that were shared on average by a lot of users, right? So it's kind of the potentially viral videos. Then we have in bin 2, that it's the one that I'm focused on, that it's the highly automated. These are videos that have been tweeting a very high number of times per user on average, right? So again, this is maybe one user sharing the videos like 500 times. So it's a clear indication of automation of some sort. And then I have bin 1, that it's allegedly like the more distributed. And the good thing about this is that then you can pull statistics. And remember that the only thing that I wanted is to color code, because actually what I wanted to focus on is the bin 2. So really the one that it's showing me automation. And when you see here at the statistics, I can see, okay, most of the tweets that shared URLs here were tweeted on average 400 times by just around one user. These are the numbers that you can see here. Whereas in bin 0, that I've just named it as the more viral videos, we can see that on average users tweeted these URLs 1.2 times. And normally like one URL has been shared for more like by 200 unique users instead of one user. So can you see the differences? It's just showing me two different behaviors on Twitter. And what I wanted to look at is these highly automated accounts. I'm not going to focus on bin 1 because we have a little bit of everything. Because in bin 1, I can see a bit of like automated behavior, but also other behavior that could be more aligned with bin 0. But this is not the focus of the research. So when we transform this into rank flows, we can see that, okay, now I have the rank flow that I wanted. I have one column with the top 20 YouTube URLs that were most shared, and this is how I ranked them. But the second column is giving me the bin average degree, that's what I was talking about. So I have bin 2, that it's what I'm interested in, bin 1 and bin 0, yeah? And I have this over the period of 4 months, and what I created is are rank flows for each month. So I'm going to focus on February and March because this is the time period that, especially Luisa Bartola, she's great. And if she listens to me, like, thank you, Luisa. So she did the analysis and we were chatting about how to refine it. So we went this far to look at February and March. And this is the kind of morphology that we get, right? So this is February, first column is 1st of February, and then the last column is the 29th of February. In this rank flow, as I'm saying, I'm encoding different values in different things. So the color is telling me whether this video was shared by many users or just a few users. And again, I'm interested in bin 2, suspicious behavior. As I can see, okay, like videos that were shared a lot of times, but just by few users. And the width of the bar, that the bars are always videos, the width of the bar tell us the number of times that one same video was tweeted. So again, here in this one that I'm highlighting, that I'm just giving like prevalence on the 25th of February, we can see that it's a video that was shared a lot of times, but just by one unique user. Whereas if I go to the 28th of February, I can see two videos that if I was only looking at the rank flow, it could tell me, okay, these videos have been shared the similar amount of times, one 140 times and the other one 138 times. But the difference here, and that's what's interesting to me, is the number of unique users that share it. Yeah? So then you can isolate this and then you can say, okay, I'm going to give you now like overall patterns, but if I want, I can isolate bin 2 and understand what channels were uploading these videos to kind of see whether professionalization has any role in this automated behavior on Twitter, right? To amass an audience. And by looking at these visualizations, oh, sorry, I don't know if I can go back. Anyway, what I was about to say is that just by looking at the visualizations, I can see interesting patterns. So in February, I can already see that from the 16th to the 27th, something is going on because there's a video that has been shared a lot of time just by one user or two. So let's focus on this. When I move below, I have the visualization for March. And the most shared video in March was tweeted 2,600 times. So there's a huge difference between February and March. That's why we have different visualizations. But again, I still have, maybe if I look at the visualization alone, I can see, okay, from the 23rd to the 31st of March, I can see a video that was the most shared during this period that again looks suspicious. So let's go to YouTube and see what is this video and what channel uploaded this video, right? Okay, so this is so far with the visualizations. So let's give a bit of information about how we can go about analyzing this type of data, right? So first of all, I would like you to give you some statistical analysis to answer research question 2. I'm checking time, so I'll try to go a bit quick to just give the results because I still have a lot. So yeah, let's say I have a research question and it's, let's look at the patterns of behavior we see over time on how people share YouTube videos on Twitter. And I can see, because I have the bins, I can see at the patterns of behavior over time. And in this case, because I'm looking at the overall patterns of behavior in bin 0, is, if we remember, this is not automated behavior. This is just viral videos, like shared by multiple users, right? But bin 2, that is the automated behavior, I can see that, okay, only 21 unique users were shared on bin 2, but they account for the 60% of tweets that were like of that month, right? So just 21 videos were shared over the period of February, but again, a lot of activity. This is again the indication of automated behavior. And if we go to the channels, because as I said, I was interested in the channels to look at professionalization, I can see that these 21 videos come from 17 channels, right? So, okay, let's look at these channels. And just a quick note that it is important for this project, but it's also important if you want to use the run flows, that it's not only these general numbers that are interesting, but what I was interested is not, okay, there's one person that is sharing this URL a lot of times this day, but is this person sharing this URL over time again and again? And that's what the average day of videos tweeted show me. And as I can see, all the kind of automated behavior that I can see in bin 2, it means that on average, people like these unique users are sharing these URLs on average 4 days, consecutive, not consecutive, but different days. So there's this kind of, there's a commitment to promote these URLs again and again, not only multiple times, but again and again over time. And this is important too. And with March, we see similar patterns, but I'm going to move on. So I just wanted to give you an idea of the kind of things that we can do. And obviously we can compare over time because we will have April and May, and it's quite interesting to see the differences between bins. But what for me it's more interesting and important is the qualitative analysis, right? So we did a bit of qualitative by this, like putting tweets into bins. But for me, the main question is, okay, is it professionalization an important factor or not in how people engage in automated behavior on Twitter? And for this, we need to start doing a bit of coding ourselves. So the first thing that we said, okay, let's look at the channels that uploaded these videos that were shared on Twitter. Let's see at the number of subscribers that they have, because the number of subscribers can give us like an indication of professionalization, right? And really quick, this is what we wrote in our paper, Mapping YouTube. YouTube has a system of like putting like status into channels. So when you are gray or graphite, I think that they call it, it's less than 1,000 subscribers, you don't have access to monetization. From Apple, you have access to monetization, right? So Opal, Opal is from 1K to 10K. Then we have bronze and silver. And if we look at the overall YouTube of all the channels, those that really make it, that it's silver, gold, and diamond, only account for 0.42% of all the channels on YouTube, which is really interesting because it means that actually like if I'm a channel that could be considered as a micro-influencer, that it's less than 100,000, maybe I really want to go to YouTube and engage in a really like tricky, like automated behavior into like broader conversations like COVID, just to have more subscribers, just to be able to monetize on YouTube, right? It's not necessarily that I want to interfere into anything. I just want to professionalize within YouTube. And that's what we were interested in. If we see at the overview of the top 5 across beans, we can see a clear difference. So bean 0, these are the videos that are viral, come mainly from very much like the elite channels, gold, silver, and diamond channels. But if we go bean 2, highly automated behavior, these are channels that are really trying to make it. Yeah. Okay. So again, if we look this across platforms, we can see that really February and March combined, 36% of the channels that we observe do not meet the threshold of monetization. 45% could be considered micro-influencers. So yeah, maybe like there's a reason why they could just be sharing their URLs like in automated way on Twitter. And then we have a 13% that are part of the elite. When we look at the channels that really like uploaded the videos that were shared in an automated way in this bin 2, we see that for American thought leaders, the Epoch Times, this is a channel that has been accused to engage in inauthentic behavior already. And zooming in with Simone Gao is also linked to the Epoch Times. But anyway, I don't have time to go into detail, but there's a reason why, because you could think, okay, if they are already making it into YouTube, why they are engaging in this behavior? But again, it's just to have more reach into what the content that they are producing. Okay. But I wanted to get, but looking at the number of subscribers, it's not enough. Because what was it really important to me is like, okay, we know that commercial is a motive. We know that spammers do this. But for me, it's not the same a channel that like their main business model is a website that is selling face masks. As we saw in February, all these patterns of automated behavior was just a website that was trying to like make some profit with selling masks. For me, professionalization, this is the nuance that we did with the second round of coding that we did, is those content creators that really want to make it within YouTube. They want to make money on YouTube. It's not that they are using YouTube because they have a website. So we wanted to categorize these channels that we were observing based on these qualitative codings. So you need to have a bit of information about what you are really looking for to go to this. And then others is just a category of those channels that really are producing content, but we cannot really consider them as really being interested in professionalizing. So when we categorize these channels based on these codes and really like making clear what we meant about professionalization, we can see that still in this bin 2 that we are observing all the time, because this is highly automated, is most of them are part of this professionalization category. Yes, we still identify channels that were kind of more spammy behavior, that these are like 6 channels, 30% of the total, and 23% of the unique tweets, because we have all expressed news that this is the channel that was trying to sell face masks, right? But just with this like quick categorization, I can see that professionalization plays a part. And also I can see that those within the category of professionalization are also invested in, as I was saying, repeatedly engaging in automated behavior over time. So different days, right? I'm going to skip this because I don't have time. But just to complicate it a bit more, but it's also a useful approach to answer one of our research questions. That is, okay, what's the link between automation and problematic content or not, right? So we said, okay, we have now professionalization, commercial, and others, but I want to know the themes of these channels. right? So we draw our thematic analysis of the channels based on the categories that YouTube gives to channels automatically. And this is also part of the paper about mapping YouTube with Bernard and Oscar. But we said, okay, there's a problem with the category of society because it's pretty much meaningless. It just involves politics, health, and religion based on YouTube, but it's not telling me anything about the content of these channels. So for our codes, we broke down, and this is work in progress. That's why I have gaps here. We broke down this category with conspiracy channels, so those that clearly say in their about section and what they are doing that they are about conspiracy, spirituality, and also news, because news channels for YouTube are part of this society. But it's really important because automated behavior, we know that hyper-partisan media is engaging with automated behavior. So let's look at this code, right? And if we zoom in into the professionalization category, we can see, okay, yeah, like conspiracy, it's 6 channels, quite a lot of tweeting, news too. Let's see what channels were like producing this content on YouTube. But then I have educational, again, lifestyle, entertainment, some channels that are doing this kind of content. And what's important here to link this idea of, okay, automated behavior is also linked to problematic. It's not necessarily. When we look at this code and when we look at this content, automatic behavior on Twitter linked to clearly not problematic content within the professionalization accounted for 43%, right, of this. And this is important because it just, again, it adds nuance to what's going on when we look at automated behavior over time and the reasons why we have this. So on the left, we have just within the professionalization bin, but if I go across all the categories from all our channels, we can see similar patterns, right? So that's the end. I have some conclusions, and then we can just go to the question. So first of all, conclusions, professionalization on YouTube. Okay, when it comes to cross-platforms flows of information, so we can see based on this study, and we still need to look at April and May, but that users not only engage in automated behavior for ideological purposes, like interference, or commercial purposes, like having websites, but that professionalization is a tactic to engage on automated behavior on Twitter, and that these strategies often fit within platforms' understandings of inauthentic behavior, because obviously it's just one unique user sharing 300 times this URL. But it's not clear that it's always linked to problematic content, as we've seen. It's important to know also that the thresholds for highly automated behavior on Twitter are related to the sharing of YouTube URLs, seem to be tied to US patterns of use. And this is normal because there's a cultural dominance of US channels on YouTube. So it's pretty much US dominated. So US YouTube channels that use Twitter to reach an audience. But also what this shows us is that platforms' content agnostic approach to platform manipulation, so they focus on behavior, can have unintended consequences for aspiring content creators that really want to gain visibility, right? Because they can get banned for being inauthentic. But what's the threshold? What could be considered inauthentic? Well, that's a bit of maybe to trigger discussion. Second big issue, okay, these patterns of automated behavior on Twitter regarding how people share URLs, and this is quite platform specific. Maybe if you reproduce this with Facebook, it's not the same, because again, we know that YouTube, it's a good platform to make money. That's why maybe people use Twitter to engage and promote these URLs. But when we focus too much on coordinated, we are missing part of the picture. And so we should focus also more on these mundane engagements on automated behavior on Twitter. And what else? this automated behavior on Twitter, when it's not coordinated, seemed to be less policed, because when we looked at Twitter, we saw that only one of the accounts was banned. And the account that was banned was this, we categorized this account as commercial, and it's the one that was trying to sell face masks. But obviously there's part of this picture that we are also missing with our approach, is that if we, in these cases that we couldn't really tell whether the same like channel owners were the ones that were engaging in automated behavior, we need to do a bit more research on Twitter and see really, because we have the information, we collected the data, like the Twitter accounts that we're sharing, because in some cases maybe it was not the channel owner the one engaging in this core like automated behavior. Maybe it could be an activist that is sharing the content of an educational channel. So this needs more cross-platform qualitative analysis to really make sense of what's going on. So we only did the qualitative analysis on YouTube. On Twitter, we just focused on behavior. And just to finalize, in this case, as with algorithms, calls for greater transparency really won't help us to understand these nuances around automation on social media, because just with a report about how many takedowns of automated accounts the platforms did, like really doesn't give me information about why users are engaging in these behaviors, and whether these policies and these enforcement of rules are adequate or not, right? So like drawing on this platform observability idea for better regulation, I think it's important to observe platforms about the cross dynamics of activity, the cross-platform dynamics, and also to do these mixed method approaches instead of just having statistics. And that's it pretty much. I'm sorry for like,
no worries. Thank a lot, Ariadna.